definitely.
Thanks for taking the time to do this, right? So I really appreciate this, Eva, because I think that this is quite interesting what we're trying to do here,
Yeah.
and the whole concept of like these nice fireside chats, so yeah, it's a good way to sort of reach a broader crowd. And I think typically the work that we do, so it's two different things, but we're quite closely connected. But it's normally quite boring, or it's seen as the preserve of other people. And what's really struck me about the things that you've been posting on LinkedIn, as I've tried to, get
Yeah.
myself a bit of a presence, is you're way better than I am at it, and you actually take what is actually a very dry subject and you make it quite interesting, and also very helpful and very relevant. And you do this quite nicely, which there's a lot of people on LinkedIn they've come up with the meme or the selfie, and there's others where the words that they use tend to be "I think this" and "me,"
Yeah,
and
yeah, the crying video, the latest. The crying
yeah.
video.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel bad for that guy because he's been turned into a meme, and it's
I know. I actually haven't read that much into it. I've just seen some headlines about it, but I haven't actually seen the actual post.
it,
Yeah,
it scrolled up on my screen
yeah,
yesterday or the day before, and I looked at it and I thought that's actually, I don't want to say not appropriate for LinkedIn, but that really stood out. But
yeah,
obviously, the guy's had such a bad day. It's been his outlet, right? And whether you like it, and if people don't like it, just mute.
yeah,
That's the wonderful
yeah,
thing
yeah.
about
He's
LinkedIn.
had such a bad day, and then he started to have even worse one.
Yeah, exactly. And now, but someone made the point on LinkedIn this morning that it's technically bullying. All the people that are actually picking
Right?
on
Yeah,
technically
yeah,
bullying. Yeah, and I think she's
yeah,
right. But no, you've done great on LinkedIn, and you've really got your presence up. So I've kind of held off, but part of what I'm trying to do with making supply chain sexy and things like that is actually talking to good people like you. But I think the main thing we wanted to get out of this today
yeah,
in this conversation is to sort of almost humanize it a bit. We wrote down the aim together, which was what we really want to do is see how we can help bring more startups forward that are looking for funding, but do it in a way where they're prepared.
yeah,
So
yeah,
this is your core business. It seems to be, I meet quite a lot of these guys, even though it's not my core business, which is why the two companies work together. But before we even get into that, let's just go into your background and your history and how we got to know each other. So tell me about Eva.
yeah, sure. So I found myself working in the startup space almost just a short of 3 years ago. And that was when I lived in Sydney. So I had a chance to go to Sydney as part of my exchange on the master's degree that I was doing. That was from Uni of Manchester. And then it was supposed to be a 3 months long exchange, and then COVID hit.
Oh,
So instead of staying there for 3 months, I ended up staying 2 years, which is great. I always wanted to move to Australia. Fantastic.
trapped in Sydney.
Trapped in Sydney. Oh no. Yeah. But yeah, it was great.
Oh, horrible.
Yeah. And that's when I started working for two startups simultaneously. They were very young. They were just about, I think, 4 or 5 months old. So I was employee number one.
Oh,
And I stayed with them for about 2 years. So one of them was an R&D tax credits consultancy. Another one was an introductions platform for founders and investors. And I think what I really enjoyed about it is that we were building all of the processes from the ground up.
mm,
So myself being employee number one, hire number one, it was sort of a jack of all trades approach where I had to take on a lot of different hats and like help to build all of the different departments. And then yeah, just learn about everything. And as I was going about doing that and learning myself, I was always the person that at uni would have very extensive notes. And I was taking all those notes and I was doing all that. And I'm thinking, what can I do with it? Well, let's start posting on LinkedIn.
yeah.
So it was literally just like my notes on what I would be reading up on and learning myself. I would just put it on LinkedIn. And as I went on, people would start reaching out to me. I was like, oh, that's super interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Or can you help us raise? Can you help us do something? And what I would have to say is like, I can, but I should probably start charging you for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we like to do this, but we also need to eat.
Exactly. And that's how my company came about. So at some point during this journey, I started my own consultancy, which was helping founders connect with investors, approach investors, also reviewing and designing pitch decks.
Okay.
I've got a graphic design background, so I would be designing pitch decks whenever necessary. And then I left Australia at some point, came back to UK, and kept on running the business until I met the team from True Altitude, which is the company that I am with right now. And yeah, there was like a lot of overlap between what I was doing and what the advisory arm of True Altitude does. So naturally, like the conversation was like, can I come on board and do all of this that I'm already doing, but with you guys? And yeah, and part of True Altitude, that brings us probably to how we met, because
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, that
because
was interesting.
you know the partners,
Well, yeah. I mean, I've and we know this is a big week for True Altitude as well because it's all gone a little bit Dubai right now because there's one of the founders, Darko, has moved here.
right?
And I think it was the other one, Nathan, that originally met you and brought you into the role. So yeah, I've been a friend of the business for a while. So mine's different. I'm in the due diligence and the strategy, but it kind of overlaps a lot in terms of the clients that we look at, and it's
Yeah,
quite nice actually.
yeah. So tell me, how did you get into that? Because you're in this supply chain consulting. How did you come about to be?
Oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, you never leave school thinking this is what you're going to do. So I've actually had a long history in aviation and
Mhm.
supply chain. Actually, a bit like you when you sort of say you do the ground up. So I kind of did that across logistics. So it's
Yeah.
I feel a bit like Adam Richmond, who's the guy who used to do Man versus Food, and on the introduction he said I had every job in the restaurant biz. Feels a bit like that. But no, I ended up moved out of corporate a couple of years ago, just before COVID, not because of COVID. So I was here in Dubai and I'd worked for some really great companies. And it just seems to be I fell into that aviation advisory during COVID.
Yeah.
The world went PPE mad. And if the truth be told, Eva, it was probably about 6 or 7 months ago I sat back and said, what do I actually really like doing and where do I add value? And to me, it's that two things. It's the supply chain strategy and the due diligence,
Yeah.
because a lot of people are still trying to replicate what was happening in 2019, and that's not the world we live in anymore. And actually there's a lot, but it doesn't have to be as fatalistic. I think a lot of this is opportunity, which is interesting because which is how we sort of came back to sort of coming to this, because a lot of what I do is investing in the supply chain or talking to people that have invested. So it's mainly the private equity venture capitalists that are looking at assets under management either just before, or maybe it's a distressed asset and they want to get the value out of it.
Yeah.
But that means a lot of startups seem to come my way, and there's a couple of tiers. Some of it's a bit, I've invented something and I see that you used to work at that company, so I would like to meet them, which I have to dismiss straight away.
Yeah.
But on the actual startup space, it's really interesting. And I think this is where it's been quite good for you and I, because I found one the other day which was really interesting. And it turns out you've already been talking to them for a while.
Yeah.
So we're on the same page.
That's right. Yeah. That was very that was very coincidental, because I met the founder when I was scouting for Techstars earlier in the year. And that's
Yeah.
how we had a chance to get to know each other for the first time and so on. And then, yeah, we just scheduled a catch up chat. And then I just said, I just randomly said about it in the office tonight. And I was like, oh, no way, because James is speaking to him too. So very coincidental.
Which is great. And that's actually and I think that was the point where we said, hey, we need to talk. And we had
Yes.
this,
Yeah.
and we came up with the idea for this. So that was actually a really good approach. That particular client, he's such a nice guy. And I know we can't really sort of say, because it might be, he's in the process at the moment and his team, but he's doing something supply chain and tech in an area that, to be fair, I hadn't really considered before. And to me, I think his material looks good.
Yeah.
It was probably one of the best approaches, and it was the way that he actually had the link. He'd got the brand, but I think he my view is he put the brand on afterwards. So to me, it was one of the best approaches I'd seen.
Yeah.
Would you say the same? And
I think so. And there's also a sustainability angle to it where I think he tackles on the issue of sustainability in such a sector that people wouldn't generally think that this is an issue. Whereas he found it and he's addressing it. And that to me is a measure of a very savvy founder who's able to see a gap before anyone else sees it.
Yeah.
So and that's what you want.
And I think that's interesting because it's a savvy founder who's prepared to walk before he runs as well. But he's also quite open about his market size is limited. You know, he's not sat there banging the drum saying we're going to change the world. You never hear him say the word unicorn. He's actually very modest with it. And to me, I think he's one of the ones that actually stands a much, much better chance of getting some serious funding.
Yeah. Because I don't think that every startup needs to be a unicorn. If you ask me, I feel like not everyone wants to run a unicorn business. Some founders just want to exit at some point. And if you can find, I think if you can find your niche and develop the right model, oftentimes that is complementary to what's already out there in the market. That can be a very profitable business. That can be a very successful undertaking, and
It's really interesting because I've got a question I want to ask you, which we did write it down beforehand, but it's really relevant. But when the way that you're talking there, it's quite fascinating because you're right. Some people are just looking for the exit, and just the experience that I've had. Now you would have a lot more than me in this, but a lot of founders talk to me about if they get this money, then their valuation's this, and they're always talking about the valuation of the business. And if you actually look at Warren Buffett, arguably it's either himself or Ray Dalio, like the world's finest investors. And Warren Buffett always says, what he'll do is he'll ask the people about the business, and if they talk to him about the product and the people and things, he views that as investable. Whereas if they just talk about the balance sheet, he turns off straight away. So my experience has always been those that don't talk about the valuation and focus on the business and making it work. They tend to be is that the same for you? Or?
I think so, yeah. And like what I've seen valuations wise is that sometimes when you start raising and then you go through your different series of raising, A, B, C, D, chasing after the ever higher valuations can be sort of a double-edged sword, because let's say you're Series A, you've hit a certain valuation and it's 2021 and you're raising your Series A and everything's great, everything's fantastic, and now it's 2022 and you want to raise your Series B. How much more traction and achievement and growth must you achieve in order to top the valuation that you had at Series A? It's a progression, A, B, C, D, and you think you want to reach higher valuation on every single one of those steps. Raising a down round is not a good sign. So once you get on this train on those different series, you have to keep going up. There's no way that you can go down, or it's not going to be as rosy. So it's a trap.
It is. It's funny actually you say that, really quite timely, because I think only 2 or 3 hours ago today, or the 12th of August today, SoftBank have announced their quarterly loss, and they are, I think they're having to fund through necessity their own down rounds. I mean, I'm sure the experts out there would disagree with me, but that's what it, there's quite a lot going on there, and they're definitely a bit bruised.
Yeah, well, this year in general, there's quite a lot going on, definitely. And I think for founders, especially this year, bootstrapping and make sure that you can extend the runway for as long as possible. Like, to me, if you can find path to profitability and if you can have paying users and you can run the business without any external investment, you should try and aim to do that for as long as possible. I met this founder when I was at a conference in Amsterdam. I met one of those founders who have bootstrapped his business to something like, I don't know, I think 30 million or more. And being approached by VCs, by investors, and his response was, no, thank you. I don't need external money. That's the position you want to be in.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So I would like to hear this from an expert. Okay, so I'll confess I don't actually know, although I think I've got a pretty good idea. But I'm going to take the Eva view on this. What is bootstrapping?
Well, to me, the definition of bootstrapping is literally just running and growing the business with their own money, some self-funded that you might have, but then also the money that the business makes.
Right.
Yeah. So
And
whatever the business makes, you reinvest back, and you don't need any external funding.
so it's interesting you said that. So I actually have a completely different business that launched last week. So it's
Mhm.
passive at the moment. We're not pushing it at the moment, and I've sunk into that a massive £200 so far. And funny enough, I've got a very, very good friend in marketing who has come on board because she sees the vision in it. Well, I'll tell you about this afterwards.
Yeah.
The idea was never to get a valuation on it, and it's to grow. And I quite like that idea, bootstrapping of
Yes.
of staying. Don't hire someone until you've turned over your first million. That seems to be the challenge with a lot of founders
Mhm.
nowadays. But someone else actually said to me, "You do know that this business, just as a concept, has a valuation of 10 million US." And I went, "It can't. It's not real yet." So,
Yeah.
but I'm not seeking funding, so I'm going to bootstrap and see where that one goes. If it tanks and burns, it tanks and burns. But if not, what's the best approaches that you've seen?
Good question. I think there, because there's a lot being said about pitch decks and the use of pitch decks, and if I am to think some of the most interesting pitches that I've seen, there would be the ones where the founder was not showing a pitch deck on the meeting at all because they already had sent it to me in an email. I've already seen the slides. I don't need to go through
Hmm.
it again, and I don't need a founder reading through it. So instead, they would show us the product demo, and
Ah,
yeah, and it was super cool because we just got to see the product, and if it was face to face, then you could also interact with it and so
yeah,
on. So it was very cool to see this in action. And I was speaking to a couple of VCs actually just the other day, where he said a similar thing, that the meeting with the founder is about meeting the founder. And
yeah,
yeah, and the business and so on. He said, I don't need them to read out the pitch deck to me that I've already read.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, so I think if anything, if I was to identify the best approach, it would be to flip the script on
yeah.
first pitch meeting. Yeah.
So that's, I think that's probably some of the best advice I've ever heard in this space. So basically,
Mhm.
it's you've already sent the pitch deck. So ideally, come in and do the product demo. I suppose even if there's glitches and it goes wrong, it's how the people. Because are you really looking there not just at the product, but also how investable the people are as well? Is that
Yeah.
what's really
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
through?
Yeah. Oh, and actually, so that reminds me, another thing that I've seen was sort of like a second pitch deck being shown on the meeting. However, that was the pitch deck that focused all on the future roadmap.
Got
So the
it.
one that they sent was, this is what we achieved, this is where we are, that's the business model, this is our financials to date. And
Yeah.
then when we jumped on the actual face-to-face meeting, when there was already initial interest on the part of the investor, the guys rolled out a completely different pitch deck, and they said,
Mhm.
"Oh, this is our future forward pitch deck.
Yeah.
We aim to achieve. This will what will happen." And I thought that was fantastic because I've never seen anyone do something like that before.
That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so there is this thing about the difference between a strategy and a plan, and I think a lot of founders get wrapped up with that. They,
Yeah.
they call it a strategy, but actually it's a plan. But it's good that they've thought about it, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, hearing that is, I think the Jap I could be wrong here, but the Japanese sometimes write 300-year business plans.
Wow.
Yeah. And the idea should be is if you can think about what the business is doing 300 years from now, you're going to get today right.
It's like the life coaches that can prepare you your plan for the next 10 years of your life.
Yeah. But then there's the stress that if you're not on plan,
Yes.
what's going on? Whereas a strategy says we want to grow and we're going to grow there through new sales and
Yeah.
divesting and all that. So you kind of it's a bit like a pilot flying a plane. We want to land in New York and
Yeah.
we're going to take off at London, but we might have to make some deviations along the way, but we're still going to land there. It's that.
And that's basically, like perfect analogy to startups. You have to start it and you have to either, like exit it or finish somewhere, but the path in between.
Yeah. So one of the, I really want to get your reaction on this, right? Pitch decks which start with a great big panel of faces and bios on everything, and they just go straight into the who we are.
I don't mind that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind that. If I can put a name to the, especially I think if it's early stage,
Yeah.
because what I always say is that the earlier you go, so pre-seed and seed, the bigger focus should be on the team.
Yeah.
So I know that I've been speaking to loads of VCs recently in the last, like 3 months. I think it's been like in the hundreds. And a lot of them, because I always ask them the same question: what do you personally look for in a pitch deck? And it's super interesting to compare all the answers. And I think the theme that comes out most often is that they want to know who's the team behind it. They want
Yeah.
to know what's their backgrounds. They want to see that they have complementary skills between each other to actually pull it off.
Yeah.
So to me, if you've got a pitch deck and it's like bang on first slide who we are and all the backgrounds, that's good. I think that's making the VC's job faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, and easier to see, like, okay, I know who I'm dealing with.
See, I've seen some of these done really well,
Yeah.
and done really badly as well. And it's usually the ones where you're 15 minutes in, you say, look, just me, I block things out. Like you either get 5 minutes or 20 minutes.
Yeah, I know. And like, so I used to design pitch decks. So I
Yeah.
do have a sort of my own template in my head that I like to see. And I think the important thing to note is that a pitch deck is not the same as sales deck
Yeah.
that you would show to your potential customers. So what I don't like is pitch decks that have too many slides on the problem and solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, because to me, like I don't need to know that much about the product itself. What I want to see is your traction and achievements to see that that product is actually working.
Yeah.
Show, not tell, that kind of thing.
I'll tell you what, actually on my website, I'm going to be putting up a free resource thing and some downloadable documents. And one of them is called Communication Principles. And it's headlined, it came from a job I had years ago where we don't know really how to work with James properly. And someone actually said, they took this from another textbook, but be brief, be brilliant, and then be gone. So I'll actually send you that, Eva, and I'm going to put it on the website as well, because I think sometimes with some of the pitch decks I've seen, the best ones are where they're brief and brilliant.
Yeah.
Who are these guys? And
yeah, because also, like if you think about it, and that was the principle that I was applying to designing all of my pitch decks, is that how much stuff do you put on a slide and how many key ideas should you present on one slide? And I would always go that you should stick to only 3 key points per one slide. And then if you think about it, if you've got 10 slides, 3 times 10, that's already 30 points that the investor has to think about and has to, like absorb. So yeah, it's super important.
You kind of want to get the answer at the beginning, right? And then just back it up. Okay. So someone's had an idea and they're rolling with it, and whether they wanted funding or not. But when's the right time to start thinking about funding? And what is the best place to start when you get there? So when you realize you do need funding, how do you?
So one of my best friends, she's also very active on LinkedIn, she's a big proponent of that, and the best advice that I got from her is that she would always say that your fundraise should start before you actually fundraise. And that is super important to note, because basically what it means is that you should start forming relationships with investors, funds, and doing this general outreach months before you start raising, because then when your runway runs thin, and you actually do need the money within a certain time frame, you don't want to go out to complete strangers. You want to be able to like pick up a phone and be like, hey James, like remember how we spoke the last time? We're now actually raising and we've hit all of those milestones since the last time we chatted. What do you think? So
That's
yes,
interesting. So it's almost being aware of the hoops you're going to have to jump through, because you can't just pick up the phone and get money. You're going to have to demonstrate certain
exactly.
things, right?
Yeah. So I would say, yeah, the best time to raise yesterday. Like soon as start building the relationships as soon as possible. And even if you are not raising, I think the concept is called always be fundraising.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is the idea of if you go out there and build relationships, you stay in touch with the investors and funds that you've met, even if you're not actively fundraising. And this is a game changer. This is what allows startups, because you hear all of those stories that this company raised within a week. How?
Mm.
Well, that's how they do it.
Yeah, it wasn't actually a week. It was just a week from
Yeah,
when
yeah.
they
There was
already had the, yeah.
a lot happening in the background and behind the scenes.
That's it's really interesting. So when someone's like, you've now realized that you need funding and you've been thinking about fundraising, now you know that you need the money. What should they do then? Apart from obviously come and talk to you. What's,
Thanks.
well, that's the obvious thing. But what should they do? I mean, is this the point where you start a pitch deck, or do you start gathering information within it, or do you go and find some stuff out? Do you maybe chat? What would you sort of say is the best place to be once you've recognized that you
Yeah.
now need to fundraise? So now you know that you need to find investors, or you start finding investors. What's the practical step that you'd recommend from there?
A pitch deck and a financial model is a start, because I think that's the two very tangible elements to a raise. And, especially if you need to go out there and, cold pitch yourself to investors, that's what you will want to send over. So yeah, so the most practical step would be to make sure that the pitch deck is great, that it talks about all of the traction achievements so far and the milestones you hit, as well as what I always really like to analyze is the use of funding.
Okay.
And to me, you see the pie charts in the pitch decks, with the use of funding. To me, you really have to be able to justify why you need this specific amount of money and how it will be allocated and what growth it will translate to. Um, and then what I would do is just to go out there predominantly, probably on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, to find investors, find funds. And there's a lot of VCs out there, and there's a lot of funds who actually encourage startups to self pitch themselves via their website with no
Mm,
more intros required. There's so many of them. So that's a great starting point. And
that's
yeah,
a good idea.
yeah. And then apart from that, just networking. Oh, and like I think if there's one good advice for founders, that would be every investor that you speak to or every fund that you speak to, ask if they could introduce you to another.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah. Because, if they come back to you and say that, oh, it's not a fit for us, the natural response should be, that's fine, I understand. Is there anyone in your network that you think this would be a fit to?
It's a really good point, because
Yeah.
you know, if you're a good business person, if someone talks to you about something, then you say that that's not really for me, but actually you might want to work in this direction.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've got a friend, I'll introduce you, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And I've seen, I've seen this play out on so many different levels. We were helping one of our clients raise capital and we've connected them to a potential investor. It turned out that the person did not invest, but he became their distribution partner.
Oh
It's
wow.
amazing. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's all about putting your clear goals and needs in a pitch deck so that people can actually see clearly what is it that you intend to do.
Yeah,
Because only that way people will know how to actually help you.
it's a really good point. Your intent is stating your intent clearly. It's kind of like, because that you're
Yeah.
looking for the help, right? So one of the really good things about the True Altitude team, and having known the guys for crikey, 7 or 8 years now. So
Yeah.
it's been like an ongoing journey. So like professionally, we've worked well together, and actually, there's obviously quite a good social fit. But what's always been quite interesting with all of you guys there has been smart money. And I think I'm talking to Darko and Nathan, and certainly yourself. I think there is that people don't have to pretend that they're complete experts. I think you've all actually been the most open team that I'm aware of, where you say, look, we're really good at this, but this is our blind spot, which is why we need smart money. That's what we're trying to fill. We're not going to pretend,
Yeah. Yeah.
do you think that actually supports a pitch? I mean, will with yourselves, we know that because you always like the honesty. We know that works really well with True Altitude. Do you think that is a general rule that all founders should take?
Yeah, I think I would actually say yes to that, because I think the focus on building your network, and where it comes, like where it becomes pivotal, is that you do not need to learn how to do everything yourself, but rather what you need to do is to identify what you're not so good at, and then find
Mm.
other people who can complement that, who can fill in that skills gap. And another topic that I was once talking to a VC about is their opinions on solo founders, and how investable solo founders are. So there's lots of different opinions on it, but like what really resonated with me is that a VC would say, I don't mind a solo founder for as long as he can present a solid hiring plan
Yeah.
that actually outlines, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not so good at. Therefore, I'm going to hire that exact person with that exact background, and they're going to complement me.
That's fascinating. So it's really like knowing the bits of the jigsaw that you need to buy in. And
Yeah, because like I think in business, and especially in the VC world, nothing gets done in isolation.
yeah,
So this is key, really.
yeah. Look, you're brimming with advice, and we kind of covered off. Like I quite like your point at the beginning. And
Thank
everyone has
you.
to be a unicorn, and what I did. It's quite clear that you believe in the story. Telling the story and
Yeah.
humanizing it. I think some of these messages you've given are really kind of good. We were talking about what the funniest pitch is ever, but I don't think any really end up being funny, because if someone crashes and burns, that's actually pretty bad.
Yeah, the crying CEO.
Yes, oh God, yeah, that poor guy.
Let's
But
stop of that, of course.
it's just, yeah, it's I don't know, but probably someone's going to put a meme up of you and I on this or something like that. But yeah, it's true,
No.
we feel the fear and do it anyway. But we were talking about the awful things that we constantly hear in pitches, the things that are almost comical because they keep coming up. So
Yeah.
yeah, have you?
Um, yeah, so I think maybe not so much this year, but I feel like last year we went through this massive craze of crypto, DAO, NFT, blockchain, and I would see a completely irrelevant pitch that would say we're blockchain enabled, I don't know, like
Yeah.
restaurant. Yeah, yeah, it's just like it seemed like it was all about throwing and sprinkling in those keywords
Yeah,
into pitch decks, even though that the startups were not really in the blockchain space. And yeah,
It's so true, because coming from a supply chain background, blockchain as a technology is really helpful because we can track things
yeah,
without marking our own homework. Everyone's checking it, so that is kind of good. But and they'll probably shoot me down for saying it, but the crypto community seemed to be, there was a flurry last year, and there's some very smart guys in that space. But then there's a lot of people where I find that they've made up terms and they can't spell the word friend properly. It's hello friends. And and that's great because they've got their own little community and no one's ever going to berate them for that. But ultimately, if you're coming out for corporate cash, or as they call it, liquidity, and
yeah,
everyone's trying to do the same thing, it almost sounds like a lot of the time they've made it overly complicated and almost
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
So we just get bored and turn off.
And you have to know your audience. If you're pitching to a high profile corporate, like venture fund, one of the biggest in the world, you're not gonna just go out there and like put memes in a pitch deck.
No.
Yeah, so I feel like that probably would be like some of the funny things that I've seen in pitch decks.
Yeah,
Um,
the memes.
yeah.
So
I'm
it must
like,
be.
yeah, I'm not sure on the use of them. I think, yeah, there's a time and place. There's a time and place for everything. Know your audience, you know? If you're pitching to an investor who uses them themselves, that could
Yeah,
be a great strategy. Yeah.
there
But
is. There is that moment. I don't know if you've seen the TV show We Crashed about WeWork. So
ah,
yeah,
um, I've seen the WeWork documentary. Is that what it was
it's a
called?
whole series. Yeah, it's a whole series based on it. And Jared Leto plays Adam Newman, and he does it brilliantly. You've got Anne Hathaway in there, who everyone loves her, and it's kind of weird because they've been portrayed as villains and useless people. They were just doing what came naturally. But the
Yeah,
thing was, they were a little bit too far out there, and it was when they were actually filing what is probably one of the most important documents in listing a company. Um,
yeah,
and it like introduced the business, and they put pictures in it, and it was talking about we are a lifestyle concept and things like that. Of course, this is Wall Street, and it's like this is cold hard cash, people. This is black and white. This is numbers, and they completely got it. And
yeah.
I'm forever seeing them where they say, like, we're going to be the Uber of, freight. We're going to, and the worst thing in a pitch deck for me is we're going to solutionize on that. I'm like, oh,
Oh no. But yeah, I've heard that a lot. We're gonna become the Uber of something. We're the Spotify for this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Nah, yeah, I don't think I'm a big fan of those metaphors.
No, no, I'm not. So there's
Yeah.
some of them. So so we've got a bunch of startups out there that come to me on LinkedIn, come to you on LinkedIn and everything, and I want to keep channeling them your way, but I always do, to be fair, either try and make sure that actually there's something substance in there and point them in the direction of some free resources. So we know one of the ways that a startup could get to you is by contacting me or my guys, and we'll have a look and then say, hey, here you go. And of course, I think at some point you say, hey, James, could you and you guys go and do some due diligence, which is great. But what could they prepare before approaching you, and you personally and the guys at True Altitude? What do they need to do before they even think about messaging you on LinkedIn?
Um, I would say to do the research on what we do and how we can help. Because then, even when they reach out to myself or to our company wide email, if they can clearly say, this is what we need, and we've seen that you guys done it before, that's why we decided to reach out to you. That
Yeah,
makes our lives easier as well. That makes our jobs easier because we know exactly how we can help them.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Because I feel like, so, it's about targeting. Like oftentimes, the reason why startups not don't get funded by certain VCs is just because like they haven't done the research in the sense that, I don't know, maybe the investment thesis is off and it wasn't a fit, or actually the fund is almost closing and they don't even have enough money to invest in what the startup is asking for.
mm,
So yeah,
good point.
it's about doing the research whether we are actually the best person to help you. Like we focus on predominantly B2B SaaS,
Yeah,
tech enabled businesses. We've got our favorite sectors: supply chain logistics, e-commerce, fintech. Um, but then also, if it's tech enabled, if it's innovative, we could, you know,
yeah.
pick something else as well. But yeah, I think, yeah, do the research. That's the most important thing.
And that's really interesting because, again, that's where we kind of cross over, because I'm really looking at building supply chains. So the new technology that
Yeah.
comes in is fascinating, and yeah, I think that's the way you described it. Then my mind was going to these guys that do Tinder, and the guys and girls, and they're just constantly swiping. I think it's right to accept someone they play the numbers game, and actually, so probably the message there is don't play Tinder with the investors.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And how can they actually? I'm going to close off in a second, but
Mhm.
what is the best way to reach Eva and the team at True Altitude?
For me personally, it's LinkedIn because naturally I'm quite active on there. But then also just, old school email, I would
Okay.
say.
Cool. Through the website, right? And if you go right the way back to the beginning of your career,
Yeah.
like which if I think back to mine, God, so long ago now. And I think you're much earlier on in your career than I am at the moment. But if you could go right the way back to the beginning, what would be the best piece of advice you'd share with your younger self?
Hmm. I think this goes back to what I said earlier about the network. So that would be on, like focusing on building your network, and not worry that much if you don't know how to do something, or if you're not so good at something, because like business, and especially the startup world, running a startup is about like finding people who can help you do that. So you don't need to be an expert, you don't need to be like you don't need to know how to do everything. You just need to be able to recognize what needs to be done,
Yeah,
get the best talent to help you do it. So
get the
yeah.
best.
Yeah.
Always be networking, and then
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
fundraising. Yeah.
Exactly that. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's Friday lunchtime, so you're probably going to have to run off and start enjoying the weekend. And in case you hadn't noticed, I've accidentally sat in the
Yeah.
room, forgot to put the air conditioning on. So in a few seconds' time, I'm probably going to catch fire.
Oh
So,
my God.
but this has been great fun. I think we should do this again, and we'll probably get maybe we get Darko, or maybe even get someone that's actually just gone through the funding process with you and
Yes.
get them onto a chat.
Yeah. That would actually be fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
Dan Dubai. All right, I really appreciate your time today, Eva. This is great, and we'll get it up on the site pretty soon. All right,
Yeah. Thanks, James. I
just
enjoyed
going to
it.
start recording. There we are.